attention if he goes on a boat race. Another change that families might make is, say you had planned to have a church service, but not all churches, these old churches in this area, not all of them are the best handicapped accessible, and somebody in your family has a wheelchair, maybe you just switch it to the funeral home. Something along those lines. Still will have a minister, your minister there, and have that. It just sometimes logistically has to be changed to another location.
Good point.
Benefit. Well, I think we kind of went over a lot of this, but as we said, your plans are set. Ease the burden on your family. The second one, your plans are on file with someone. So, as I mentioned, we have some information here. Do we like it when you call us? Yes. We love having those conversations ahead of time. It's actually, I enjoy pre-arranging, just like you guys do. It's fun. It's a little bit looser than someone who just lost someone. You know, I truly get to know the person a little better as well. But it also allows us for that information to be on file. It's on file with someone. Say you sell your house. Say you move. Say your kids accidentally throw things away that are at your house. It's at least on file with the funeral home. That being said, does it always have to be? No. Some of the information here, there's a booklet that we're going to hand out to you guys. I give it out like minutes at a funeral home because I think it's one of the best tools you can have. I give it to people and I don't want to see it again. Why? Because it has every aspect of information that anyone in your family will ever need. It's a place to list your bank accounts, your 401s, your retirements, your savings, where your funeral home is, who's your accountant, who's your lawyer. Okay. The biggest thing, the biggest takeaway I hope you guys take from this, not necessarily that you have to call us. Okay? You don't have to. But the biggest takeaway is to plan ahead. Plan ahead for that inevitable. And that's the best part I can.
So to that point, if we do something like this and do initiate the trust, we have some kind of document.
You will get documentation.
Yep. So that if we all
That's
die
exactly
in a
it.
crash, somebody can get in.
That's exactly. As long as you don't have the key with you.
Yeah.
But yes.
Don't get in a boat with children.
The funeral home is required to give you documentation. Likewise, the trust account that we all use will send you documentation. So not only does the funeral home have it, the trust account does, and you do as well. So you're covered.
And you don't have to set up a trust account.
Nope.
You can just have your arrangements written down. And it can be with a funeral home, or you can just have in this booklet, we'll kind of show it to you guys towards the end. It has things like, what's your mother's maiden name? Surprisingly, we need that. You know, your social security number.
Yeah.
I don't know my mom's social security number. You know, can't expect your kids to know it. Something to be written down. We can hold it on file, and it's protected, or you can just have it in the booklet so that when the time comes, you can say to your family, okay, in the event that I pass away unexpectedly or expectedly, go to this folder. You know, it says, I give families a folder that says Dapston and Chesney Funeral Home with my card. Put my card on the fridge, put their cards on your fridge, so that it's just known. And your family can call us and we can say, yes, we have everything on file here. Or we can say, okay, we gave her this book, it's gonna look like this. Check in her files.
Wonderful, wonderful advice.
Yeah.
Beautiful advice.
And in regards to prepaying or kind of the financial aspects, a lot of people, if you have life insurance, a lot of people say, I have this life insurance policy, that's what I want my funeral arrangements to be paid for, and that's absolutely fine. That is one of the primary, reasons for life insurance for many people. But we still walk through the same process of saying you want X, Y, and Z. That comes to about $12,000. Would your life insurance policy cover it? Yes or no. And then we also talk about keeping that life insurance policy up to date, knowing who the beneficiary is, and making sure that us as the funeral home maybe have a copy of a statement with the policy number, and make sure that we have that beneficiary name and information on file, because that is one of the things that us as a funeral home can assist with, would be life insurance assignments to help pay for that funeral. But that's something that a lot of people, kind of the two options in regards to prepayment or setting aside that life insurance policy for the purpose of using it for your funeral
And
funds.
do us all a favor. If you have life insurance and you want to use it for a funeral, don't cash it out. Please.
Don't cash
keep it. Let your kids know. We can get it at a later time, I promise. We want your family to like us, not hate us. Generally, that life insurance is going to be more than what the funeral's going to be.
And another important thing is if you have multiple kids, let the funeral home know ahead of time who's going to really be the one in
Yes.
charge. Let us make a note
Yes.
of it. And it doesn't have to be the oldest, it could be the youngest.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. No. You know, just let the funeral home know, okay, when this happens, this person is the one you're going to call and talk to, and it's going to be, yeah, I know, it's not going to be any of your kids, it's going to be me.
Something that I can speak through, and I look around the room and I know many of us, one of the reasons we're here is we've all experienced multiple losses, or we're close to people who have experienced losses, and we are trying to minimize the impact on our families. I look at Pat, and the first thing that comes to my mind is that a lot of this was born from our conversations about GERT, which stood, GERT was her mother's name, and the acronym stood for Get Everything Ready Today, which is a concept that Linda really carried through with pushing this. Not that we hadn't been, really, I would have to say as a church, you all know, when something goes on here, everybody here jumps in to assist with that process.
We bring a crock pot full of stuff.
So we are an educated group of people in this, and then I look around and I see everybody thinking, gee, I didn't think of that aspect, I didn't think of that aspect, and it's been incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to bring forward that you did with me that was incredibly helpful, that people don't discuss, and you said it when you said multiple children, reminded me, personal artifacts in terms of jewelry. You and I had a very personal discussion about my mother was adamant that my father took his wedding ring, she would be taking her wedding ring. And I was adamant that I would have it. It was not going with her. It was the most difficult decision that you and I had to make. Because it was Peg's wishes to take her wedding ring with her. It never came off her hand the day it went on, and that was the end of it. We made a decision, and you helped me work through that, which was invaluable, and that's my point of this. This was an invaluable service that Kara, and I'm sure the others could provide it, that I could not have navigated alone. The ownership, the guilt, the concern of having gone against my mother's wish of having her ring. And our choice was to substitute something of lesser value that I purchased and Kara put on her, and that's what she took with her. So there are aspects of this, while we see all this and we know all this, there are conversations we can plan for everything. That was a conversation, even knowing everything that we were going to do, that came up, and thank God, I was an only child. There was no one else to have this discussion with. Linda has siblings. Many people have siblings. There are a lot of other people, grandchildren, who have voices in these things. And that's something I don't think you're getting the credit for. You're giving us the description of all of these things. But those interpersonal conversations that you have with us, even ahead of time, are augmented so much and were so much simpler and easier and much more profound because we had taken care of the business before the business was done. This was really the impact.
Well, that was something that we had talked about after we had done the arrangements. I think it was a day or two after you came in, a few days before the service, so.
But it undermines the value of, this is a bright congregation who have done these things, know this stuff. We try to stay on top of stuff, and sometimes there's just something that comes in you weren't expecting.
But you just brought something up about grandkids having a voice. I've had grandkids be the ones that run the funerals, ends up being the one in charge. Everybody knows it, saying, you know what, nope, it's my granddaughter. She's the one who's going to run the show. Listen to her. Nobody else will have their heads on straight. So.
Wow.
Does anyone have any more questions about prepaying, pre-planning in that regard? Yes, go ahead.
Is there a difference in cost with cremation and a regular funeral?
There is, ultimately with cremation, depending on, well, it depends what you're gonna wanna do. But generally speaking, cremation is lesser cost. When you take a look, for instance, even at a simple cemetery, to open the grave, there's generally gonna be a discrepancy in cost. So yes, there is a little bit of a difference in the cremation and burial. But
That kind of brings us to our next slide of our options.
Yeah.
I saw the item about out of state.
yes,
If you have a plot in New York, but you pass away out of state, what are the ramifications?
we'll get you there.
Okay. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
No, that's a great
But-
question, but it's a big answer. Yeah.
But yes, there's more than one way to get you back to a plot, especially if it's a family plot. Yep.
Okay.
The simple answer, but yes, there's
Yeah,
always a way.
okay.
Start this one.
What are your options? So we have burial, cremation, green burial, burial at sea, and I think most importantly, yeah, burial at sea. Most importantly,
Sure.
if you dream it, it can happen. So the traditional funeral that once was is no longer. There is no such thing as traditional. You come into us, our job as funeral directors are one, to personalize, which we'll talk about that, but that personalization can carry into truly what are your final dispositions. Ultimately, your body will go somewhere. So oftentimes I like to start with that. What would you like as your final disposition? Your goal is either to be cremated or buried somewhere locally, not locally, things of that nature. Whether it be a green burial in Rhinebeck Natural Cemetery, which we're so lucky to have so close in our proximity. So ultimately, where that endpoint is, and I kind of work backwards as just my philosophy as a funeral director, do you want to have calling hours with your body present? That's still possible with a cremation. Right? That wasn't possible, say maybe 10 years ago, but it is something a little more popular. You can ultimately be cremated, but you can have full visitation with your body in a traditional casket and come to church here, absolutely, and then the cremation to occur following all of those services, right? So there are options, and us as a funeral directors, we can work with meeting those needs, meeting those wants, doing part of that, all of that, and kind of piecemeal it to what works best for you, what works best for your family.
Nice.
Can I just ask a question?
Go ahead.
What is a green burial?
Oh,
Is that details to follow?
It is gonna come.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
I'll wait till we get there.
Do you wanna start? All right, so the first one, burial. This is probably one everyone's familiar with. This is, I will say, the oldest custom that we have as human beings. Even back before we lived in houses and everything else. The oldest tradition is to bury someone. A couple of pictures here just to represent. Generally, a burial takes place at a cemetery. You have multiple different options when it comes to that, such as location, place, reverence. I say reverence, you guys have a church cemetery here. There's Catholic cemeteries, there's non-denominational cemeteries, but they all differ in what they are capable of and what they allow. Actually, this one right here is a Jewish cemetery. So they're all different, they all have different aspects, and they all have different regulations. Something else to think about, you touched on the small details. If you want to be buried, does that make a difference to you? Where you are, what it entails. Is it with family? Is it more of a religious denomination? What part of that is important to you? Generally with a burial, but not always, you have the forefront being calling hours the night before or even the morning of, followed by going to a church or the cemetery. With that being said, it is possible just to have a small gathering at the graveside. That's certainly an option as well. So with this, it allows for many different facets.
Are all plots a given size, all the same?
Generally speaking, but not always. This one cemetery here, the Jewish cemetery, they're actually generally narrower and smaller in size because of the regulations they have.
Okay.
And I know Claire, on behalf of Cole Rockley, or
The reason why I ask is because people change their minds whether you want to be buried or cremated.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it seems all my family floor, everybody wanted to be buried. But a couple of them already buried. They can't change their mind. But anyway, the rest of us, we all want to be cremated. How many cremated urns, or whatever you call it, are there on a plot?
What I would do is
And
reach
they-
out.
can they be planted on the burial?
Some cemeteries, yes. Some cemeteries have a regulation as far as how many. Just in this area that comes to mind, I know 2 cemeteries. One allows 3 cremains to go on top, or I'm sorry, 3 cemeteries. One allows 3, one allows 2, one allows 4. Whatever cemetery they're in, the best thing is to call them up, say, who is in this plot? What am I allowed to do if I'm cremated? Am I allowed to go here? That's the best information I can give you, just because every cemetery is different. Like I said, I know 3 off the top of my head that have 3 different regulations. But generally speaking, most cemeteries do allow for you to put cremains on top of a previous burial. Do you know?
Correct, no, yeah, it ranges. I know in regards to local cemeteries, like Ryan said, it ranges. Some allow 3, some don't care, some allow 1, and kind of what the requirements for that burial. One thing with burial, a lot of cemeteries here locally do require what they call a vault. That's a hard outer container that serves a few purposes. So even with some cremation burials, they might even require a cremation vault. So that's a larger outer container, not, of course, not the size of a full casketed vault, but it would be, you know, an urn vault of smaller size, but they might require that, which might contribute to the space allotted, things like that.
Yeah, our plots here, in the old cemetery, the plots are all 4 by 8 feet. And these were set back in the 1860s. Now, with the vault, the size of the vault being what it is, 7 feet 3 inches, and that doesn't leave much space. So if you also have a headstone that you want put in there, and that's put in before the person dies and is buried, it's going to run over the place where a vault would be. So you have to consider that kind of thing. The unit, the small section up here next to the parsonage and the section across the road, these are 3 feet 4 inches by 10. So you have plenty of room for the headstone and the vault if it's full burial there. But of course, you're going to have cremation burials, and depending upon how the remains are going to be buried, we allow 2, 3. We'd like to consider 3 as the maximum cremation burials, separate burials.
And how many plots do we have on this side of the road here?
Pardon?
How many potential plots are over here on this side of the road?
Only about 600.
Yeah.
Only
that's kinda
600,
interesting.
so rush if you
So
haven't
we
found
have
it yet. Hurry
We
up.
have about 1,000 buried here together in all 3 cemeteries.
Very, very few places in the old section, and most of them are already owned by a family, and that's in perpetuity. So they're not available. But some of the people here have blocks in the old cemetery, and
Okay.
it's a burial vault has been used for full body burial, and then sometime along the way, a member of the family really wants to be buried there. I think cremation burials can be made on top of an existing vault. Now, what to do as far as the identification of the person, I don't know.
Go ahead.
So there are some cemeteries in this area, I think most of them in this area, Claire might be able to correct me, where if you had a family member who was a full casket burial, you can bury some cremations on top of that later on. that is an option in most, I think, in your area. I know in Rhinebeck they allow that.
And this is one of the reasons why I have a funeral director, because they know all the different rules and all the different cemeteries
Yes.
around here.
And if we don't, we'll call.
Especially Claire. If I don't know, I call Claire.
Yeah.
Or even somebody, no, each cemetery is a little bit different.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Now, can you still be buried in your garden and push up bases or what?
A full body or are you
Yes.
cremated?
A full body, you can be buried in your backyard if you want. There's a lot of legal regulations that are involved. A lot.
Some counties are not a fan.
Exactly.
It's a lot of kind of red tape that you have to get through, that a lot of times families are like, that's okay, we'll pick, you
But
know.
cremation's okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You took them home, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wait, regarding that, my great uncle Ray was a race car driver, and so he was inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame. And my cousin had his ashes for years, and they were having a tribute at Middletown Racetrack. They called Middletown, they wanted to be able to sprinkle my uncle's ashes on the racetrack, and they said it was illegal to dispose of human remains that way. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yes, I know about it.
So basically,
Yeah.
anywhere you go, it'll be illegal.
I'm gonna be honest, if
Yeah.
you're taking the ashes, and I'm sure these guys will agree, we always say it is better to ask forgiveness than permission.
Yeah, here you go.
But also, if we are just giving the ashes, if you're not burying your ashes, and I imagine cremation, we're probably jumping ahead a little bit. If we give you the ashes back, our job's kind of done.
Yeah.
You know, that's where you're choosing to scatter them and whatnot. We can tell you where you're not really supposed to, but we're not gonna be there holding your hand. I'll tell you, make sure it's not a super windy day, and if it is, make sure you're scattering them in the right direction.
We probably don't have it on video.
Yeah, don't have it on videotape, don't announce it on
Yeah.
social media, but again, you know, our job's kind of done that. If we're not helping you bury it in a cemetery, so no, you're not supposed to do that, but
It's been done before, and I'm sure it will continue.
you are so,
They ended up doing like a Shawshank Redemption thing with a little bit of dirt at a time.
Exactly, yeah.
And they all walked the track and got it
That's
done.
horrible.
There you go.
I'll tell you, we're not supposed to scatter ashes in the Hudson River.
Yes, you are.
Right.
You are?
Well,
Oh, never mind, I take that back.
There's a lot of places,
Well, there are
and
waterways.
also,
No
the
parks, not
issue
no
is,
parks, right.
the information is
Sure, yeah.
not out to
Parks,
the
yeah.
public, right?
Yeah.
So like Ryan just said, and Carl, like back and forth, yes, you are. Wherever you go to try to find that information, you'll probably find, you know, differing information, which makes it even more difficult, right? Some places will say, yes, you can just fill out this form and then go ahead and do it, or you need a proper permit, or some places will say absolutely not, and that's the hard part. There's really no one regulating a lot of this stuff, but then also there's not one easy answer and one easy place to kind of help us out to provide those answers. So we across the board just kind of stay a little hush.
We do, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but as far as cremains in the Hudson River, it is allowed. I just want to touch base on that. You do have to be supposedly 200 feet offshore.
Yes. I'm talking about the edge of the water.
Find a guy with a boat. Maybe not go out with them, but find a guy. And as far as
On Tuesday.
but you are allowed, you're supposed to be 200 feet offshore with cremains, with a body, it's 2.5 miles. There's regulations, of course, you know, don't go down to Norrie Point in Statsburg and start spreading cremains there. You will get in trouble, I guarantee it. It's an environmental park. There's better places to go.
But not only that, that's disrespectful for the person. You know, let's have a little good taste about this and not just fling them to the air.
But some people prefer to be in the water and things like that.
But
You
do
know,
it with dignity.
Absolutely, you know.
My father's hope is he is a longtime resident, a lifetime resident of Rhinebeck. He would like to be put in the sander in the winter so he can be spread all over.
Something useful.
Something useful. He would like to be useful, yes.
Okay,
But,
so much for that.
yes,
Nice try, Linda.
There was a situation here where the person bought 4 plots in the new section of the cemetery for her and her husband and their 2 children. 2 children are still alive. Both the husband and wife have died. His ashes have, I don't know where his ashes have gone, but she said that, well, maybe they'll all be cremated. Well, okay. So she had the stone put in and all 4 names put on the stone. As I said, the son is still alive. The daughter is up in Vermont. Her husband, I don't know where. The names are on the stone, and the stone is going to be there forever. And she said, well, that's the way we want it, because they're all facing east, and we'd like that, and that's the way it is. But that plot, those plots are nailed down in perpetuity. And there may be a couple of grandchildren somewhere around there who would have access to those plots if they ever wanted to. But as far as who gets plots when you're gone and there's nobody left in the immediate family, so you could explain the legality of that thing.
Sure, yeah, so it goes in regards to regulation, so kind of from one generation to another. So if the husband and wife have passed, it then goes on to equal rights of all of the children equally. So technically, if someone was to be buried in the plot, let's say maybe they want to give a plot away to like an aunt or another relative, that both children would need to agree to the burial of using plot number 3 for Aunt Sally, right? So it's the rights of burial for that next generation. So say those two pass, the sister and brother pass away, it then goes to any of their children and kind of the decision making. What I will say, we live in small communities, right? So a lot of times when folks are coming to tell us that they want to use that family grave, we do our due diligence, but it sometimes can be difficult, and a lot of times we don't find many issues or needing proper legal written authorization at times, but just a simple conversation, you know, and if we can do any of that legwork ahead of time. You know, my brother said that he would give me one of the family plots from, you know, whatnot and things like that. That's something that you kind of want to consider, you know, thinking ahead, but it does technically go to kind of that next generation and to have kind of rights of burial from everybody, but sometimes easier said than done with how spread out people are, you know, things like that. So.
Now, have the socialists made big changes?
Oh, no, we're not going there. We're not going there. That's another discussion. Keep going.
Oh, yeah, sure, okay, we can go to the next slide.
Natural burials.
Natural burial. So, natural burial, the closest natural section is in the Rhinebeck Cemetery. I am there quite often, and it's really lovely. Has anybody been to the natural section in Rhinebeck at all? Okay. Yes, yeah, that one picture. Not the other one though, no, just the one in the wicker basket. So the natural section, we call it natural and not green, because green is a lot of special accreditation and they have to follow certain things to a T. So Rhinebeck calls it the natural section. If you are buried there, you are not embalmed, you are only buried 3 feet deep, and you are only buried in things that are essentially biodegradable and eco-friendly. A lot of folks opt for this type of casket, which is a wicker basket. I think we all use the same company, Passages, that are out of New Jersey. Or some folks opt for what's this bottom picture, which is a trundle and a shroud. The funeral home is usually the one. I will be, you know, wrapping you and getting ready for this. The natural section in Rhinebeck, no cars are allowed back there. So as you see, there's a road there. And we walk back together, and your family participates in the burial. You're helping lower the body into the grave. You are handed a shovel, and you can help as much or as little as you like. So, can have similar services in terms of if you want to have a minister back there offering prayers, but the main thing is you are going back to the earth. Straight back to the earth.
And are there no tombstones?
The stones, you can have stones, but there's rules for them. They have to be, Claire can correct me on this, indigenous to the area and flat. So a lot of times people go to their backyard, find a big stone and bring it to you, I'm assuming, right?
Correct, yeah, and they
That's
can
what I
only
tell
be
them
about
to do at
yay
least,
big.
yeah.
So they are small in size, so when you walk back there, I mean, it's truly as if you're in the woods. So if you have property on the back of your house, you feel like you're right there, right? So there are trees, there are some small mounds, which represent that a body has been buried there, and there truly are just natural boulders or stones set into that specific plot. A lot of times when you're walking on the path, you don't even realize, that there's a stone there. You truly have to be kind of above it to then see where you are. But we've had, a handful of burials.
How do they keep track of the plots?
They have it mapped out very efficiently.
They have it
yeah.
mapped out, and they do have metal discs there
There
temporarily,
you go.
just to keep track of it, because they don't really take care of it. It's not as well trimmed or groomed as, the front of the Rhinebeck or any of these cemeteries normally are. It's really left in its natural wild state. So depending on the time of year, you might be getting bit by mosquitoes. You have to check for ticks. Or I just had a natural burial the other day and it rained all morning. So I said, do not wear the nice shoes, ladies. Wear the boots.
My friend has his own cemetery. Do they have same restrictions that you have?
So each individual cemetery will
It's
have different
different
restrictions.
They've had it for the last 65 years.
So a lot of family owned, essentially each entity, so every cemetery has their own regulations, whether they're governed by a church, governed by the Division of Cemeteries in New York State, or a family-run cemetery, right? So they can basically make their own rules. So very different from, these cemeteries that we're speaking of. There's very few family cemeteries
But some cemeteries have rules, you have to have a vault, or other ones don't. That's
Correct.
It depends on the cemetery.
But there are some cemeteries, not to confuse you, like the Rhinebeck Cemetery, there's the old section, there's the new section, and there's the natural section. In the old section, vaults aren't always required. It depends
When you
on,
bought it.
Now, he had a special request.